Today, you and I are getting out of the studio and checking out a neat little aquascaping shop in Seattle, Washington. Aquarium Zen is a tiny little aquascaping shop located down in the University District of Seattle, Washington. And as soon as you walk in the door, you are immediately hit with aquascaping vibes, and I'm all here for it. As you walk in the door, you're greeted at eye level with some shallow and nano tanks as you go up the stairs, which I think is a super fun and cool perspective to have on such small tanks. Once you get up the stairs, you're immediately greeted by a really cool aquascape that has a very overgrown look to it. But it's a vibe, and there's nothing wrong with having an overgrown tank. Right next to it, you have this little cube tank that's filled with bulbitis, and there's a nice little addition of cherry shrimp, which I think is super fun. Once you're at the top of the stairs, you turn around and you see this massive floor-to-ceiling plant wall, and at its base is a super densely planted tank, which I think is a super cool touch to have inside an aquascaping shop. Moving on, the next tank you see is this beautiful rimless ADA aquascape that I believe is just the definition of natural. This tank just looks like it was scooped up out of nature, and I love how the hydrocotyl tripartita is just growing like crazy, and not only do I think it looks cool, but it's just a vibe. Spin around 180 degrees and you are just met with this tank of madness. The plants are growing like crazy and there's a ton of fish inside. Something I really like is that Aquarium Zen sells both UNS and ADA tanks, and they've got a nice stack of them at all times, readily available for you to purchase. Sitting right next to the stack of tanks is this beautiful rimless aquascape that isn't planted yet, but is going to be in the next couple of days. I talked to the owner, Steve, about this, and he said he's pulling a lot of his inspiration out of one of the ADA aquascaping books. Now, obviously, the tank is still under construction, but Steve had told me that he's got some manzanita wood soaking in another tank that he's going to be putting in there, as well as putting some Hygrophila pinnatophyta and Riccia all throughout the tank. So that means that in a couple of months, I'm gonna have to go back and check out this scape for myself because I think it's gonna look really good. Now moving on, we have this beautiful beta rack, and all these betas are available for sale and super healthy looking. I really appreciate that they're kept in what looks to be 1 to 1.5 gallon jars, so they have plenty of space to swim around while living in the store. Now moving on, we have this plant holding tank, and there's not a lot of fish inside this tank, but the star of the show is obviously the shimmering light, which how can you not love? This thing just looks awesome to see. Okay, now it's time for what I think is arguably my favorite scape in the entire store, and that's this little Dua scape. Just the Hygrophila pinnatophyta on this thing alone is awesome. And then the moss addition is just super cool. There's no fish or shrimp in this tank because it's so small, but you can see there's a couple of snails in there to keep things clean. Now the next section of the store is the fish section. And if I counted correctly, there's 26 tanks in the Aquarium Zen, all housing fish available to purchase. In the dead center of the fish section is this little cube tank that has this massive monstera growing out of it, and it's all growing directly up towards the skylight in the building's ceiling. Next up is the Hardscape Dojo, and what I really appreciate about Aquarium Zen is that they left a decent amount of space for their Hardscape Dojo, and they supply it with plenty of types of hardscape to play around with. I noticed there's a lot of manzanita wood, but there were a ton of stone options to play with as well. Now in the back section of the store, they have a few more tanks that house fish and shrimp, as well as some plant holding tanks too. So that's always a nice thing, is that they've got a little backup section if you can't find what you're looking for in the front. Just like the stack of tanks in the front of the store, they've also got a massive stack of tanks in the back. So there's plenty of sizes to choose from, and plenty of brands to choose from as well. Now, if you haven't figured out by now, the folks at Aquarium Zen love ADA, and they've got an entire shelf of ADA fertilizers for you to choose from. When you turn your head, you can see that they've got the best botanicals on the market available, and that's Beta Botanicals. Now, if you don't know by now, I'm a Beta Botanicals ambassador, and if you purchase online from the Beta Botanicals website, you can use the code SIMPLY15 for 15% off your order. So being an ambassador of Beta Botanicals, it's always super cool for me to see their product out in the wild in other stores. They've also got a good selection of substrate and equipment, so that's super nice to see. And they have a very good tissue culture selection. I bought a couple tissue culture plants from them because they had some rarer types that I haven't seen before. So you'll have to stay tuned for those in the next video. And that's the shop. That's all there is to it. It's a pretty small space, but jam-packed with plenty of things to get your aquarium journey started, or for a hobbyist like me who's looking for more advanced stuff, they have that too, which is super cool. So overall, I really enjoyed this shop. I was very pleased with the experience I had there. The staff and ownership are incredibly nice. Massive, massive shout out and thank you to the owner Steve for letting me come into his shop and film. Steve told me that this year is Aquarium Zen's 10th year in business. It's really cool to see an aquarium business like that running for so long and being such an established piece of the community. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do so. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.